Chronic illness became real to me at my surprise 14th birthday party. I was stretched out on the living room sofa, where I'd been confined by crushing exhaustion for the last few months. I might have been reading the new Harry Potter book. Then, a knock on the front door, my mom answered. A dozen neighborhood kids filed into the room, greeting me with cheery, happy birthdays. A semicircle of smiling faces formed around me on the sofa and looked at me expectantly. But I wasn't happy to see them. I didn't want to be turning 14. Birthdays marked time in a deeply meaningful way at that age, and this was my first while homebound by illness. I wanted to pretend that time wasn't passing, not celebrate it. I knew so little at the time, but already I clung desperately to hope. And who wouldn't? I needed the crevasse forming between myself and my peers to stop widening. Who was I without them to shape me? No one. And so the stakes felt existential. Hope took such different forms for me then. I hoped to recover in time for the start of high school, to not miss basketball tryouts. But months passed with no improvement or diagnosis. Then years. My hope, my life, became oriented around one all-consuming question. What was wrong with me? One of the periods of my illness that I found the most difficult to survive was when I was the least ill. Now I was a year older, 15, and whatever was wrong with me was apparently a very rare illness. How many harshly lit exam rooms had I entered by then? How many times had I dangled my legs off the end of an exam table and had a reflex hammer strike my knee? And how many times had I left those exam rooms hating my life more than when I entered them? I've never understood the doctors who, as they washed their hands of me and implied I had a mental health issue, did so with an air of amusement. Being a minor at the time, my medical care was directed by my mom. She believed in me and in my illness. When conventional medicine had thoroughly failed me, she looked for help in the alternative. Without exception, these alternative practitioners believed they understood my illness and how to heal it. The first one was an old man with a ponytail and a walrus mustache, and his voice sounded exactly like you'd expect from someone with a walrus mustache. He began by pricking my finger to draw blood, and then he had me place it against a microscope slide, an object I'd become familiar with not long before in 8th grade science class. His microscope also looked like it was from my 8th grade science class, except his had a digital view screen. He pointed to it as he discussed the evidence of illness he saw in my blood. I was nonplussed. Even at that age, part of me knew that this was too good to be true. Now that he'd diagnosed the issue, he wanted to treat me. I remember the unfortunate smell and taste of the ozone he had me breathe. The panic I felt as he stuck a syringe deep into my mouth to inject my tonsils. The way my sweaty shirt stuck to my body afterwards. I don't remember how we moved on from him, but that was typical. A few appointments without me feeling any better, and one practitioner replaced another. What changed was how many hours the drive was. The Lyme-literate MD was different. He was a real doctor, for one, which meant something to me. And he diagnosed me with Lyme based on a scientific blood test. Irrefutable proof of my illness. Or so he led me to believe. I was a textbook case, he said, but I wasn't responding to treatment like one. We were patient, though. The blood test proved that we were on target. I was finally getting prescription medications, stuff befitting the seriousness of my illness. I had a PICC line installed to go on IV antibiotics. I made a photo of it, my Facebook profile picture, as if to say to my peers, "This is where I've been." There was about 3 years between my first and last dose of Lyme antibiotics. If you know antibiotics, you know that being on them this long is bad. Antibiotics are harsh on the body, especially the gut. I've always suspected that they caused the Crohn's colitis that I was diagnosed with not long after. That disease comes with an increased lifetime risk of certain cancers. The last thing this doctor said to me was perhaps the most damaging thing he could have said. That Western medicine could do nothing for people like me. There it was. I was doomed to this wretched life. To utter loneliness. To never knowing what was wrong. What he did was kill the last of my hope. This wasn't the end of my journey through alternative medicine. I had a year of even worse things to come. But it was the end of my desire to live. I was 19 and planning my suicide, when I was finally diagnosed with ME/CFS. So the 6 years that I spent without my diagnosis were very difficult. However, it taking 6 years actually makes me one of the luckier people with ME/CFS in the world. There are only a few countries on Earth where the average time to diagnosis is less than 6 years. And this is among survey respondents, people privileged enough to get diagnosed at all. The true average time to diagnosis is even longer. Here's a little chart I made which compares the number of people with ME/CFS in the most populous countries in the world. The average person with ME/CFS lives outside the Western world and in a country where the disease is unrecognized, where diagnosis is virtually impossible, where there's no end to being blamed for not responding to treatment. The torture that I lived through because I didn't have the right diagnosis could have continued indefinitely. For most people with ME/CFS, it does. And while ME/CFS and ME/CFS have only been around for several decades as diagnoses, the disease has always existed. It's only in recent times that the illness has been, for a lucky minority, proof of anything other than an inherent weakness of mind and character. I was 18 when I started asserting myself. I suppose it was inevitable that years of being failed by alternative medicine would lead me to scientific skepticism. I'd grown increasingly at odds with the direction of my medical care. My first action was to advocate for a trip to the Mayo Clinic, an American hospital several states away, renowned for diagnosing rare diseases. My mom agreed on the condition that I first spend 2 weeks at an alternative medicine clinic of her choosing. It turned into a month-long nightmare. The daily injections, which left me shaking violently with a high fever. That meant they were helpfully stimulating my immune system, supposedly. The 6-hour days inside a pitch-black room, absorbing IV cocktails with the other victims. A disembodied voice from the adjacent hospital bed asking if she could pray for me. Waking up in the night, feeling like I couldn't breathe. The drop of blood under a microscope thing, again. Healing with magnets. I wasn't hiding the fact that I hated being there. My mom entreated me to stay a couple more weeks, and what choice did I have? I left, more determined than ever to kill myself. I would do it if the Mayo Clinic couldn't help me. I'm alive today because the Mayo Clinic diagnosed me with ME/CFS. I was so tortured that my main feeling at being diagnosed with an untreatable chronic illness was relief. Some people dispute the usefulness of an ME/CFS diagnosis. There's no treatment, so what's the point? My diagnosis helped me begin the critical work of accepting that I was chronically ill. It described my symptoms perfectly and was proof that I wasn't delusional or alone. For the first time since falling ill, I asked myself, could life like this be worth living? I didn't know, but I decided to give it a shot. The question that guided my days was, what could I do right now that would bring me pleasure? I started meditating, which grounded me in my mind and body. I took up classical guitar, which gave me something to work at daily. I dipped my toes into online ME/CFS communities and socialized with people who understood me for the first time since falling ill. I developed hobbies and friendships. I let go of my demands to the universe for a return to health and ability. My need for hope became much less urgent. My life felt hard, but sustainable. The particulars might vary, but the arc of my chronic illness acceptance narrative is quite common. Some of it may be relatable to you, but I want to mention the things that I left unsaid. Accepting my chronic illness didn't mean accepting a lack of housing. It didn't mean being stuck relying on my abuser to survive. It didn't mean accepting an unbearable quality of life. Acceptance isn't something equally accessible to all. It is enabled by privilege. We who need less hope to survive the day are fortunate. Misplaced hope is a dangerous thing. My mom's led me through alt-med hell, and mine led me to take an experimental treatment which left me bedbound and very severely ill for 6 months. First, my worsening health made me say goodbye to playing guitar, then to my online friends, and then to food which required chewing. I was that weak. My symptom burden had become a constant roar, oppressing me every waking moment. Yet here at my sickest, the medical neglect worsened. Doctors couldn't be persuaded that I, with so-called chronic fatigue syndrome, required help in the home. And so I had no medical care at all. I felt as if I'd stepped into some deep hole in the street. A small circle of light overhead, and the sounds of people going about their lives as usual were my only remaining connection to the world. I was mere yards away from a busy road outside my bedroom window, and yet I'd never felt so far from humanity. I was tormented by the thought that all my future held was for my health to continue deteriorating until I simply couldn't bear living anymore and was forced to kill myself. Acceptance, which had once saved my life, no longer felt possible. I was simply suffering too much. I needed hope, a scientific breakthrough, treatment. Following MECFS research news for the previous 5 years had made me cynical about how long this might take. I'd probably said in some long-buried chat message that it could take decades. That was all well and good when I didn't need hope as a matter of survival. Now I did, and so I became an optimist. Hope was fragile and essential. I avoided online discussion that suggested that treatment might take more than a few years. I didn't see myself being able to hold on that long. To say that I'm extremely fortunate that my time being so severely ill lasted only 6 months would be an understatement. I was aware of more cases of people remaining that way indefinitely than improving. I was sure that the misery would only grow until it ended me. The life that I've lived since then as an only mostly bedbound person has felt like a gift, as though through some cosmic glitch I was awarded more time here. Like I've reached life's bonus level. The experience deepened my understanding of acceptance as a privilege and of the life-saving potential of hope. I had no idea that the world of illness was so full of predators. They'd dispute that label, but they harm desperate people by offering false hope. I don't care whether the alternative practitioner who had a child stick useless medicine up his butt had pure intentions, nor the neurologist who prescribed me graded exercise therapy. In both cases, the harm could have been avoided had they been scientific skeptics, had they the principles to intelligently question conventional wisdom in their fields. Both can cause great harm to chronically ill people, but I do see important distinctions between scientific and alternative medicine. The former is committed to testing its ideas against reality eventually, to following the best available evidence wherever it leads, in theory. That makes it salvageable. The latter, on the other hand, has no such commitments. It's allergic to testing its ideas and accepting inconvenient evidence. It clings to beliefs disproven centuries ago. It's stagnant by nature. Scientific skepticism is chronic illness self-defense. Entering the world of the sick puts a target on our backs. It costs nothing for incompetent or malicious practitioners to offer us what we most need, hope. They have an infinite supply of it to sell, and our money spends just fine. Scientific medicine can be similarly dangerous. Doctors are usually ignorant, often prejudiced, and sometimes abusive. Treatments that cause harm can be endorsed by the highest medical authorities. The safest path to getting help is rarely clear. Few of us have the expertise needed to critically read research, but we can listen to those among us who do. We can learn about the limitations of treatment anecdotes, about the cheapness of unproven mechanistic hypotheses. They're not worth much. All of this serves to teach us where not to place our hope. Hope can put us through hell. It can also make life worth living. We need it sometimes more than others, but it's always at our side. The temptation to let it lead us where it may can be overpowering. It thinks it's found the light at the end of the tunnel and drags us onward. It's crucial in these moments that we plant our feet and think as scientific skeptics do, that our next steps are guided by critical thinking and not wishful thinking. That's how we safely coexist with hope, our chronic illness companion. I'm privileged to have a bearable quality of life currently. All my basic needs are met, and so my hope can be for a fuller ill life, for more love, autonomy, and meaning. I don't need my illness to improve to survive. But this can change. Someday, I might find myself again fighting to survive. And hope might not be enough. But it will be there, by my side, doing its best to keep me alive.